Gorgeous girl. Junior, 17 years old. Math. Third hour. I walk into my new class like I did for all my new classes. Nothing special, but I was lucky enough to get 5 to 6 of my friends sitting around me. Most of that class was spent playing video games on our laptops because our teacher was just awful at teaching. Almost as if he tried to teach assuming that the class already knew the material. Like what? How are we supposed to know how to do the problem if you've only shown one example and had already erased it? Ugh, he sucked. I could write a whole post about only him, but I have to stay on track because it's about to get interesting. This class was full of a whole range of students, so I'd probably say there were 4 groups that would stick together and talk. The room was kind of separated in quadrants. Our group was in the back far corner and consisted of jocks, a few gamers, and not to sound self-centered, but I would say more quote-unquote popular kids. Not that it matters much, but, well, actually, yeah, that's kind of important, so remember that. To our left were a few of the rednecks and louder kids, but just between each other so they didn't disrupt class or anything. In front of us were kids that were pretty quiet and focused more on math than talking. And finally, in front of us were this group of girls who were all kind of feminists with a few super feminists. When I say super feminist, I mean 2 of them literally said they hate men and white people, so I don't know what else to tell you. These girls were all pretty cool, besides when it came to the political stuff. But I wouldn't say we were really friends with these girls. Well, I guess most of them. There was this one girl who I'll call R that sat right in front of me. R was absolutely gorgeous, so me being me, I would often ask her for a pencil or a question so I could talk to her. She didn't seem to be as enthusiastic about me as I was about her, but I thought maybe I wasn't on my game or something. I was 17. Give me a break. We were also in totally different cliques, so we didn't know each other very well. I had heard things about her and obviously knew her name, but that was pretty much it. Everyone said she was really nice and sweet, and man, did she live up to it. The days went on, but this little thing never grew past classmates. R was just the girl that sat in front of me. Every day I'd go to class, maybe say hello, find my seat, and that'd be it. She wasn't any more than an acquaintance, and that was fine with me. One day I came into class, and sitting in my seat was this girl who I hated and immediately started arguing with me about political stuff. What was the argument about, you ask? Not important. The thing was, though, that this little back and forth turned into a 5 versus 1 when all her friends joined in. Unfortunately, I was the only one in my friend group in my class that day, so I was getting cornered fast. Even my math teacher was getting into it. As tensions rose, so did the emotions. The argument was growing uncontrollably and eventually veered off into a path that had a lot to do with depression and anxiety. This topic was super sensitive for me because I was on medication and hadn't told anyone about it. I'd like to say that at most 3 people knew and swore never to tell. I did a pretty good job of hiding it, so when they started talking to me about the subject like I was some ignorant a-hole, I got pretty upset. This is the moment that R started talking and was being super defensive, and she seemed really knowledgeable of the subject. That didn't change the fact that we were just going off at each other. Gosh darn, that girl really ticked me off. She made everything I said seem like I didn't care about people on medication. Eventually, the argument led to me saying something along the lines of, you shouldn't have to depend on pills. They should just help your bettering process. R took it as something completely different, thinking I said, if you take pills, then you aren't really you. She took it really, really hard and called me some names and broke down crying. Stunned, I stopped myself from saying too much more because it took me back so much. I'd never seen R so full of emotion, so I knew maybe I hit a little too close to home for her. I've made girls upset before, but not like that. The arguing stopped pretty soon after, and soon the bell rang. Everyone got up and simply went to their next class. On to something else like nothing had ever happened, but not for me. I was feeling weird about the whole situation for the day and couldn't even really sleep. Is she depressed too? I asked myself. I never met anyone else who struggled with what I did. The next day, I woke up with it on my mind, so I knew I had to fix the little mess I made. When I came to class the next day, something was different. The seat in front of me was now empty. R had requested to change seats so I could no longer just tap her shoulder like I used to. This little variable was enough for me to leave it alone. I figured if she couldn't even sit by me, then she sure as hell doesn't want to talk to me. This continued for like 2 weeks before I couldn't stand it anymore and finally decided to message her about it. The weird thing was, when I asked her about it, she said she didn't even remember the argument. I'm not the brightest, but I know you don't just forget a moment with a heightened emotion like that. I wanted to press, but instead, I told her to forget about it. Things weren't ever the same with us, and we were left instead with this awkward, hate-filled aura that floated around us when we were around each other. I figured that was all it was ever going to be, or so I thought. Fast forward to the start of senior year, the very first day. I was pretty excited and ready for all my new classes. Each class was filled with more and more of my friends all the way up to my last class, foods/nutrition. It was 2 hours long. As I waddled in a little late, and in front of me were only a few tables to sit at, 3 of the 5 of them were completely full and had a few people I knew, so I was kind of screwed. I looked to my left. There sat 2 super weird kids I did not get along with. Guess that's not an option. I looked right towards the last table and see 2 girls I don't really know, so I start heading that way. But at the last second, I had noticed I must not have seen the third person at the table. It was R. Immediately, I turned around thinking there's no way in hell I'm going to sit by her. Realizing the other table was possibly the worst seat in the history of the world, I looked down, sighed, turned, and sat down at R's table. You could actually feel the uncomfortableness as we made eye contact and both looked down. That's exactly my luck to be put in the situation. Then guess what? The teacher tells us that we'd better like our seats because they are permanent. Wow. We were both unhappy, but there was nothing to be done. All there was to do was to suck it up and get over it. As days went past, our little frizz sort of died out a little. We definitely still hated each other, but started talking again. We were at the same kitchen for cooking too, so we didn't really have a choice. Our conversations eventually grew more and more until one day something happened that changed everything. Our class often had times to go on your computer and do things like a worksheet or something. While I worked, I always had music playing in my headphones. Always. I didn't listen to what everyone else did though, and it kind of sucked. Actually, no. It really sucked. Listening to punk rock music wasn't really common. I liked bands like With Confidence, Sleeping with Sirens, All Time Low, and a few others. It was hard finding music like that when no one I knew actually liked it. I mean, there were songs that I would show my friends and they'd end up liking it, but never felt like someone actually had the same taste in music as me. I'm a hopeless romantic, so don't cringe when I say I've always dreamed of meeting that girl that likes my music and is, like sort of a badass and just understood exactly what that kind of music does to you. But let's push that thought aside. It was just some backstory for what's coming up. I had to start a new paragraph because thinking about it just gave me the chills. Sorry, I'm writing this trying to get all that stuff that goes through my brain. I don't know why I tell stories like this, but if you've made it this far, then maybe it's not too bad. Nothing was out of the ordinary on that day. It was boring and just kind of, there. 2 hours left is all I could think. I was already sick of school and each day was getting worse. Teacher says to us that we have free time to work on homework, so I pull out my computer and immediately grab my headphones. The homework was table-based, so we had to work together, and at this point, R being at the table didn't bother me much, so I decided to ask her for help. She looked a little confused. We didn't really talk at this point, but still. She helped me anyways. A few minutes in, I noticed she had headphones in too. I hesitated and asked her what she was listening to. She almost hesitated too, seeming embarrassed. I smiled a little smile, and she was like, "Well, they aren't that popular, so you might not know any of their songs." I peeked over and took a look at the screen. It might sound stupid and not that big of a deal, but seeing her playlist and knowing almost all of the songs, I could not believe it. I looked at her and I was like, "What? You know these bands?" Her eyes locked with mine and she said, "You know these bands?" I don't even know how to put it into words. It was like lightning. The rest of that class, we showed each other song after song after song, talking about them and pointing out the best parts only pushed us deeper and deeper into our own little bubble. We had been so lost in each other that sure enough, the bell goes off and we didn't even notice. We were both taken a little off guard, so we just sort of hurried and went home. I couldn't even sleep that night because the rest of my night, she was all I could think about. I mean, where can I even start? This girl drove me crazy all this time, and all of a sudden, this? I eventually fell asleep. And all I remember the next day is being crazy nervous. What if I tried to talk and she didn't care anymore? I guess I didn't mind much since we didn't really like each other, but as soon as I got there, it picked up just where we'd left off. R said something to me though that I'd never forget. Once we got back into music, she had this frustrated look on her face when I showed her a new song. Apparently, she'd already heard the song and really liked it. Then out of nowhere, she goes, "Ugh, why does it have to be you that likes all this music?" At that moment, I knew she was thinking the exact same thing I was. I had a dumb smile on my face for so long after that. Each day got more and more interesting. I learned that she used to think that I was a major a-hole who only cared about myself, and I told her I thought she was a B, so it actually worked out kind of well. Every time she opened her mouth, it was like angelic music I couldn't get away from. Whether we were sharing headphones to hear new music, or even just nonstop laughing about something dumb in the kitchen, there wasn't a single dull moment with her. It even got to the point where I actually wanted to go to school in the morning. The days where she was absent felt so empty to me. It was so disappointing, and I think the other girls even noticed it too. I always wondered if she felt the same way when I was gone. There's no way a girl like that would think of me like that, I thought to myself. I kept asking myself this until I learned that I was taking a class trip and was going to be gone for a few days. The day before the trip, I said to my table that I'd be gone for 2 days, and R immediately had a face of just, I don't know really, sadness? It was so genuine, and she was like, "What? No," but tried to play it off right away after. I smiled at her, and she looked back, and it was like we could read each other's minds. From that point on, I knew we were both in the situation of being drawn to each other with nothing that we could do about it. I never officially said it, but I had the biggest crush on this girl, and I think she had one on me too. There was only one thing that was keeping us apart, something that was way more than enough for either of us to act on. She had a boyfriend. She started dating him in the summer, and they were pretty in love. This guy had been her first everything, so I knew it wasn't some random schlub. Honestly, the guy was kind of a D to her. He'd come to class, pull her shirt up if her cleavage was showing, and just sort of talk down to her. You could see it in her eyes when he hurt her, and it was hard to watch sometimes. I wanted to try to comfort her, but I knew it was pointless. I think he caught on to me and her talking and would stand in between us, even halfway through our conversation, so we'd have to stop. I tried to say as much as I could to her before he'd come to her at the end of class. He was usually the end to our fun every day, but I didn't mind. Even talking with her for a minute made my day. Remember how I said R was really sweet? Well, she was, but she had a side to her I never knew about. Our teacher sometimes played favorites and would let some kids on their phones and others not. On this day, she decided that R was the one to not be on her phone. In less than a second, R had this fire in her that I could almost feel just by looking at her. She snapped back and they got into an argument that lasted only a few words. Those arguments started occurring often, and to be completely real, they made me like her even more. I'd argue with a teacher or two if I knew they were being unfair, and apparently she did too. I don't think I've even told her that I liked it, which sucks, but there's not much I can do now. As the semester drew to an end, I realized things with this girl would never turn into anything. I had gotten a girlfriend, her boyfriend and her had gotten even closer, and we weren't going to see each other in class anymore. The days that we had were incredible, but at the same time so depressing because we both knew that it was going to end. I don't know how we both knew, but somehow we did. As we said our goodbyes, I'd always hoped maybe it wasn't our last goodbye, that maybe once, just once, we'd be able to talk again. I haven't talked to her since, and it's been about 3 years. Although we didn't talk, I never lost hope. I saw her at a party about a year after, but we didn't talk to each other. I looked up to see if she was looking at me a few times, but she never was, so I didn't think to approach her. As a hopeless romantic, I thought to myself, maybe it was like one of those movie scenes where I look up, and as I look away, she looks, and we never get to have the connection I was dying for. That R wants just as bad as me to look. I wish I knew the answer to that, but I don't know if I ever will. I still listen to the songs she showed me and wonder if she listens to mine. I'm left sitting here with this empty feeling, and I don't know what to do with it. I guess that's why I went to Reddit to let go of my thoughts and quit bottling everything up. So yeah, that's basically my story. A guy and a girl who hated each other that never thought they'd end up being friends. I know it doesn't have a happy ending, but not every story is a fairy tale. Maybe one day, but not today. I wish today. She made my heart melt in a way I'll never forget. And that's enough for me.